Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our technical webinar, Cloud as Business Enabler. Thank you for spending part of your morning with us. We're glad to have you, and we have a great session planned for you. Before we start, please note that everyone is muted today. If you have a question, you can submit it into the Q&A box on the bottom right corner of your screen. And we will be recording today's webinar, and attendees will receive a link to the recording following the session. We have two excellent and knowledgeable speakers today. From Aspire, we have Kevin Leahy. He is Aspire's Data Center Practice Director. And from Cisco, we have Alex Lakind. He is a Cisco Technical Solutions Architect, focusing on multi-cloud and compute. All right, and now I will turn things over to Mr. Kevin Leahy. Kevin?
All right, thanks, Chris, and thank you all for joining us, and particularly thank you for Alex for being here with us as well. We all know that cloud is being driven by business, and that developers and business units have driven that early adoption. And the reason they did it was that notion of time to market and really the user experience. And there was lots of data where people said they adopted cloud, even though they would potentially be more expensive, but they needed to get that time to market, and they needed that excellent user experience and access to all the tools and options that are available. Now, the pandemic that we've all gone under has certainly accelerated that, and more importantly, changed the business criticality of so many of those applications they were deploying on the cloud. Now, the downside is operations did not have the tools or processes in place. The level of automation that you need for operations and to keep pace with that environment just wasn't in place. They weren't in planning on that level of scale. And today, that application user experience replaced the traditional metrics as the way you're going to optimize that environment. And so how are you going to deal with that? Well, no one has the skills today to keep pace. And more importantly, if you look at the rate of change that happens in clouds and the number of new functions and new releases that come out every day, it's impossible for you to keep pace with the skills on even one cloud, let alone that multi-cloud environment that all the data says everyone has. So if your end user experience defines your IT brand, then it has to define your IT decisions. We know that clients will leave if that end user experience is not right, and there's lots of other digital options for them to go to. So while you're always balancing out to deliver that best user experience, in the end, you also have to deliver the cost. You have to constantly optimize the cost, not just every 3 years when you make a new CapEx purchase, but every few minutes as you're changing the dynamics of your workloads and delivering those new functions and new users. In order to do that, you have to abstract out as much as you can. You can't just isolate on a single tool or a single technology. And what does that drive? It's what I call application-aware infrastructure management. You need to know what the application is doing, whether it meets your requirements, and then you have to have a knowledge engine that says, we know what to do and how to optimize that. You can't rely on a single person. In the old days, you would watch someone lean back in the back of the room, and he would be the person who knew how they were going to adjust. With clouds spread across the enterprise, multiple users, multiple applications, all digitally integrated, no human being has that capability, and hence that critical nature of that knowledge engine that underpins the changes you're going to make. And with that, I think that's a great time to turn it over to Alex and talk about the tool in the industry that we work with every day to help our clients deal with this challenge.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for your time this morning. Well, as Kevin pointed out, today we're going to focus on some of the cloud operational challenges that many of our customers are facing. So we'll cover Intersight Workload that runs in the cloud, that gives customers full visibility, automation, scale, and I think it will really help some of the infrastructure folks just to optimize the existing environments. And if you look at what COVID has brought to us is, a lot of IT operations is under a lot of pressure just to kind of keep the lights on, right? As we move into digitized world where you have different clouds that you have to manage, right? Whether it's, different public clouds, private clouds, the entire hybrid environments where you have lines of business that come to infrastructure and operation team with set of business requirements. You have cloud architects, you have DevOps engineers, you have a lot of different data points that you have to manage, maintain, and secure. And infrastructure team is challenged to make it operational, make it secure, make it that, it's always on. As a matter of fact, many customers that we work with, and based on some of the studies, 43% of organizations want release changes frequently, right? Leveraging CI/CD pipeline, so the infrastructure code gets pushed in instantaneously, just for them to deliver more services and more, the applications that hosted in the cloud, that hosted on-prem, that hosted everywhere, right? Edge sites, many different, challenges that infrastructure team has to face, and how do you do it, right? In order for many of our customers to successfully achieve that level of, cloud-like experience, whether it's on-prem, off-prem, anywhere within an organization, they need to break silos, right? They need to start operating as, as a cloud provider. They need to decouple some of those storage team, network teams, virtualization team, server team, and have them work together, right? So if you look at some of the, and I just highlight a few, right? And what challenges does some of the integration team and production teams have? On-prem apps, cloud apps, open source tools, branch, containers, the virtualization, the backups, the list goes on and on and on. In order for them to have this successful model, working model, they need complete visibility. As we talk about Cisco Intersight Workload Optimizer, IWO, right? This is what it runs in the cloud, right? So this is all SaaS based. And the purpose of this architecture is to provide DevOps engineers, infrastructure engineers, complete visualization of the hybrid cloud. Because in today's day and age, there is no such thing as 100% in the cloud, right? And it's not just one cloud fits all. So it's a complete hybrid cloud environment that needs to be mapped, integrated, right? And you kind of have to deliver this always on expectancy to the lines of business. You need to be able to run analytics, right? And kind of match the resources and capacity dynamically, right? So you need to have always on performance, cost, governance, right? You need to have those recommendations and specific actions that you can trigger upon, right? So, whether the workload's running in many different clouds or runs on-prem, you need to be able to kind of walk through the life cycle of this application. What if something changes? What if I'm going to introduce additional security measure into the mix? How is it going to change my workflow of this application? So as we talk about IWO, we talk about simplifying resource management, right? We're talking about reduce operational expense because the idea is to consolidate a number of different management tools, right? Nobody needs another tool to manage the infrastructure. You need to be able to consolidate. You need a single dashboard. It's not just something that you can look at and then go somewhere else to take actions. You need the orchestration type of capabilities. And, it's something that's leveraging some of the learning capabilities, and it's capable of adapting very, very quickly, right? And again, that's the gist of our today's conversation around IWO. IWO is API based, right? And, it's not something that you have to write, you have to customize, it's already there, right? So it just plugs right in. And again, as we talk about IWO and as we talk about cloud workloads, we're not just talking about virtualized infrastructure. This could be bare metal. This could be some of the standalone devices that sit somewhere in a closet. The workloads that sits in the cloud, right? The container-based, all different types of hypervisors, right? You as a customer is challenged to support VMware, Citrix, Microsoft, right? AWS, Azure. I mean, a lot of different infrastructure management points that, you have to be able to support as targets, right? So as we look at the IWO, this is all API driven. That takes a lot of this input that puts into what we call, the workflow orchestrator, right? So now if you need to manage your EC2 or VMs or Azure workload, it just becomes another target within the IWO. And again, IWO is in the cloud, it's SaaS-based, makes it super easy for you to configure, install. There are no agents, right? So there isn't something that you have to install on top of, the VMware or AWS or Microsoft. As I mentioned, earlier, this is 100% API driven from the very beginning. This is already built, ready to go from the integration standpoint. And all you have to do is just point to the target. So if you want to manage environment on-prem and you happen to run VMware, you just point to the existing vCenter with APIs that's already built in. If you're running Hyper-V, perfect, right? If you want to leverage this architecture for some of the the bare metal innovations, it's there as well. Microsoft, right? Some of the application performance management, the storage capabilities, where IWO really kind of gives you that optimized orchestration and innovation. So what does infrastructure teams need, right? If you look at what does infrastructure teams need, they need complete reach, right? You need to be able to have architecture that you can reach across any infrastructure, whether it's running anywhere in the world, right? So we're not just talking somewhere, many customers that are global customers, they have infrastructure that and they have challenges just to be able to manage their own infrastructure that sits within their own data centers from a single pane of glass, right? So comprehensive reach across any infrastructure, it's really what a lot of IT infrastructure teams need today in order to operate as a cloud provider, right? Unified operations. With IWO, as I mentioned earlier, it kind of brings a lot of different resources together: network, compute, storage, virtualization, public cloud, private cloud. So you need that unified operational model, right, where you can operate and work jointly with integration team, with production team, with the lines of business, where they can come to you with a set of requirements and you have complete visibility into the end-to-end architecture. You can take a look and you can see what resources that you have that you can allocate for this specific workload. It's not just, hey, I can just spin up resources somewhere in the cloud. How do you manage that? How do you make sure those additional resources that you just spun off is actually utilized cost effectively? And again, a lot of this is, how do we apply automation, right? Because I think we all know how to build virtual machines and how to create networks and how to allocate storage. How do we build automation for the real-time balancing? How do we make sure all of that the cost control is there? Because with the ease of consumption of public cloud, there is a big aspect of cost that comes along with it. And next thing you know, you end up with a sprawl of virtual workloads that's running somewhere that many RT organizations have no visibility into. IWO brings that together. And Cisco Intersight, which is where the Intersight where IWO is running, it's a cloud-based management platform. It runs in the cloud. So now you manage, the entire management capabilities that runs in the cloud. And again, it's agentless, right? So there's no API. Every single infrastructure, right, that I'm discussing, right? So API driven. The intent is not to add more. And we have APIs that's already built in with different public providers and private providers, right? And again, gives you that capabilities and visibilities into and exactly what IT team needs. Now, as we look at, how do we transform data into insight for end-to-end optimization? Well, so now we end up with a lot of data, right? So you have data that sits on-prem, off-prem, edge locations, colo sites, you name it. How do we analyze this data, right? How do we collect and analyze and provide real-time information? So one of the cool innovations as it relates to Intersight and IWO is a lot of telemetry capabilities. So what we do is we collect the data, we analyze that data, we run through the existing ML AI capabilities that we have behind, the working engine, right? That gives you that sort of like correlate of information. As a result, right, you end up with data that actually makes sense, real-time data that gives you that visualization of the workload. It gives you the dependency information, right? If my virtual machine is running out of storage, well, guess what? I don't need to go to another interface to allocate that storage. I can just do it right from my, from the IWO, right? I can resize, I can modify, I can add resources on the fly, right? And guess what? You don't have to do this as a manual format. You can build the workflow where you can say, hey, you know what? If I'm going to hit 80% of my storage capacity, here's the set of actions I want you to do. I want you to add additional storage. I need you to add additional CPU, virtual machines, things of that nature. And the goal is not get to the point where, well, we just detected the slowdown, right? And we need to add, 30 gig or 50 gig, just to kind of, it's proactive analysis. It's not being reactive, right? Because in today's day and age, if you are in reactive mode, that's too late, right? Nobody wants to have any, support tickets coming in. You want to get ahead of that as a result. And in order for you to do that, you need to have the right tools. You need to have the right workload placement and cost optimization. And, how do I make sure that, the set of recommendations that I can provide whether you're running in, the EC2 in the cloud, how do you make sure, the workloads that's running on-prem have the proper recommendation in terms of sizing, right? And the big part of it is, how do I lower the cost? Because I think many IT has been challenged, do more with less. Okay, so how do I do more with less? Well, I need to be able to add more services, right? As you add more services, that's how you reduce cost. But at the same time, you don't want to end up with architecture where you have hot systems and you have cold systems, meaning if they're not properly load balanced, right? You want to make sure that everything that you run in a cloud or on-prem in a hybrid cloud environment is profitable, meaning that it's all load balanced, you get the best performance for the best results. And for that, that's really, the dependency optimization integration. That's really what IWO does for many of our customers across hybrid cloud environment. As we look, the IWO, it's as I mentioned, it's leveraging ML AI, right? So it's always continuously optimized clouds, right? So what I'm showing you is, just a simple one business application, right? And if you look at this business application, has X amount of virtual machines that support this application. It's got databases, and this is a large application. It's got X amount of storage devices, and this is across many different clouds, right? You can see how many hosts support this application. This can span across many different data centers, right? But it gives you that sort of like a workflow dependency. And guess what? If my memory is running hot, right? It will give me this recommendation whether I want to increase the workload or I want to decrease the workload. And the goal is to get to the common state where it becomes profitable, right? I mean, a lot of our customers with the IWO, the feedback that we get, the tool pays for itself. Because, hey, if I have X amount of workloads that's running and I can optimize that workload by X amount of percentage, right? The cost gets reduced. And many of our customers, they see cost optimization in millions, right, if you will. When application demands increases, the IWO execute actionable task just to ensure the application performs. But if you look at some of the retail customers where when the Black Friday comes, right, or there's some kind of retail event where they need to, the demand is no longer there, right? You have a sale and then, the following week, it's a slow week. How do you give that back infrastructure to from the cost perspective? How do you decrease that automatically, right? Without having to pay for all this infrastructure up front. Hey, remember, the reason why many customers went into the cloud just because of the consumption model in terms of being able to increase the workload and decrease the workload. And IWO gives you that capabilities in terms of being profitable and scalable and give you that application performance stack. Now, as I mentioned, right, so the IWO is always simultaneously solving performance, right? I mean, the whole point is to deliver performance, right? We want to deliver performance at the right cost, right? You want to make sure everything is optimized. That a big deal is a compliance, right? As you know, many infrastructures that run, in country, out of country, right? Different sites. You want to make sure it's secure, it's optimized, and as you have all those policies, the workflows that you built in, you can actually add layer of security, right? So now you're able to provide performance, cost, compliance, right? And a lot of it is done in real-time decision-making engine. This isn't something that you have to sit and figure out. When you start with IWO in the cloud, you figure out, I just want to get comfortable, right? So the first thing it's going to do is going to analyze your workloads. It's going to provide you with some recommendations, right? It's going to give you some of those capabilities where, do I want to acknowledge every single change, right? And you might as well, kind of get comfortable with the IWO and then kind of say, yes, it does make sense, right? Your application's better, right? So if the application is running at 70% workload, that might be okay, right? So once you build a baseline, right, you have this real-time decision-making engine, it's a lot of machine learning AI capabilities that take over, right? They give you that sort of like granular, step-by-step workflow automation chart where you can, as I said earlier, make it, semi-automated or fully automated. And that's really what many of our customers take advantage of. As we look at, what does that actually mean? As we continue to assure application performance, right? The goal is to optimize, right? We want to optimize the workloads no matter where they run, right? We want to make sure it's optimized, but it's increasing the efficiency, right? We want to make sure that you have the right set of resources for the right size workloads, no matter where they run, right? CPU, memory, storage, right? You know, all of those, everything that makes up your infrastructure, you want to make sure the efficiency is there. And many customers, they're used to some of the basic tools, right? And I think many of you on the call familiar with, you know, I can vMotion the VM, I can do live migration to VM, but guess what, right? How do you make sure that database that sits behind this infrastructure is going to give you that performance at scale, right? So you're not, my point is not just about moving virtual machines, it's about moving, you know, to right size the entire workload, which is inclusive of storage as well. And how do you simplify the operations, right? And that's the beauty of SaaS. Everything that we discussed so far, there isn't something that you have to install on-prem. It's SaaS based. It's delivered to you in the cloud, and you just point to different targets, right? And you're up and running. So, you know, when application workloads get resources they need, that's when the application continues to optimize, right? Application continues to perform, right? I mean, that's the reason why, you know, the clouds exist, right? The data centers exist, and just to give you that best application continuous performance integration, you know, the resources are efficient utilized, right? You want to make sure as you run those reports, right, as you look at the utilization, as you have to go and justify why is that I need an additional set of, you know, the instances in a cloud or on-prem, you want to make sure everything that you're running up until this point is efficiently utilized, right? And then if you look at the cloud spend on the budget, you want to make sure that, hey, you know, you know, how do I compare my workload cost that runs on-prem, off-prem, and different clouds, and how do I move those workloads across different, you know, the options that's available to me, you know, and really that's when IWO kind of brings it all together, because now you have complete visibility. You don't have to manage your different public cloud, hybrid clouds, or private clouds with different set of tools. You have one single dashboards, right? And that a big one, which is a lot of security team realize, is the fact that the policy is a follow. Right. So what does that mean, right? So you might have a set of policies that sits on-prem, and then you might have a set of policies that sits off-prem, but how do you make sure that it's the same security compliance? How do you make sure this application is compliant no matter which cloud it sits? And again, right, you know, the whole point is it's give some time back to IT operations, right? Instead of having to manage a number of different management tools, we want to give time back to IT operations that can continue to innovate, right? You can focus on delivering more services, do more with less, right? By delivering more services and have complete visibility into your architecture with optimized resources, cloud span, efficiency, and security.
I want to reinforce two things. One, developers always started here with the biggest images, and then as the workload scaled, they saw the cost run away. So how do we get, you know, our arms around that? More importantly, how do you optimize? And one of the things we've seen, you saw Alex present that capability, and arrives first as recommendations, where the user can say, I can adopt this, I'm going to use this, I'm ready for it. And they begin to trust it. Because in many cases, our clients saw the cost run away, but they didn't think they could reduce anything without fear of impacting that application outcome. And that's huge. The other part is this is SaaS, and as you see the evolution of the clouds, this keeps up. Continuing innovation, sprints happening all of the time. And unlike an on-premise tool where you have a version that you have to think about when do I upgrade, that continual evolution of function to keep pace with the clouds is just so critical. So what do you do next? Right? One is step back and look, what are your core challenges? What are the things that you're struggling with today? And how are you going to get there? Then focus in on really that core element of your applications and how are you deciding to, you know, deliver that? And then how do you keep the processes up to date? Well, that knowledge engine gives you that capability. If you'd like to continue the conversation, we're more than happy to do so. As you can see, we have a great partnership with Cisco. We have a lot of experience with IWO, and we have seen this deliver, you know, huge benefits for our clients. And that automation, that knowledge engine, gives you that knowledge base that no person can have and no IT team can keep pace with, because they're looking, I was looking at the entire install base, as opposed to you looking at just what's inside your environment or the particular cloud deployment you've done. So huge advantage to be had. I want to thank Alex for helping us out on this webinar. If you have questions, please reach out.